All proceeds go to the C-SPAN Education Foundation.
Now coverage of Day 24 of NATO airstrikes on Yugoslavia from state-run Serbian television news, recorded at 1:30 p.m. Eastern and translated here at C-SPAN in Washington, D.C. It runs an hour 40 minutes.
You're watching primetime news of Radio Television Serbia. President of the Republic of Serbia, Milan Milutinović, received today Dr. Ibrahim Rugova. Pursuant to the joint statement of President of Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, Slobodan Milošević, and Dr. Rugova of 2nd of April of this year, the discussion considered again questions about the political solution of the problems of Kosovo and Metohija. It was jointly agreed that the political solution has to be based on the principle of full equality of all citizens and ethnic groups. It was stressed that a just and permanent solution for the problems in Kosovo can be found only by respect for the multi-ethnic, multicultural and multi-religious approach, an approach that Yugoslavia and Serbia have been appealing for since the beginning. It was stressed that this approach is a basis for a permanent and just solution of the problems in Kosovo. Both parties agreed that only direct dialogue of those who live in the province, together with representatives of all ethnic groups, can come to a solution that will be mutually acceptable for all of the communities of Kosovo. It was also concluded that the stopping of the bombardment of our country, a condition without which this political situation cannot be achieved, because the victims are all citizens of Kosovo, regardless of their ethnicity and religion, regardless of that whether we are speaking about Albanians or Serbs. Both parties showed readiness that even in these conditions, continued the process that was begun already in finding a permanent solution for the problem in Kosovo. President Milutinović and Dr. Rugova agreed that this dialogue is indeed a strengthening of the mutual confidence as a very important condition for finding a way out of the crisis. Magister Nikola Šejnović, Vice President of Federal Government, also attended the meeting. After today's decision of the Russian Parliament for the accession of Yugoslavia to the Union of Russia and Belarus, it was stressed in Moscow that this is a political initiative of the three states to stop the war. Furthermore, there should be a vote of the Federal Assembly of Russia and Belarus on this decision. The Russian State Duma supported the accession of Yugoslavia to the Union of Russia and Belarus. They officially expressed their support of Yugoslavia as a third possible member of this union. Most of the representatives expressed the conviction that this political union will be a very important move towards strengthening the relations between the three countries, but also for international order, to stop the brutal action of NATO, because West will have to think this is not an aggression against Yugoslavia alone. Gennady Seleznov, who was not present at today's meeting, is convinced that the new union cannot be ignored by NATO or United Nations or the West as a whole, because after today's decision, all of the military actions against one of the member countries of the Union will have to be differently considered. The President of the Communist Party in the Federation of Duma termed the accession documents an important historic step that can stop the military aggression in the Balkans. In the document that was adopted by Duma today, the President of Russia and the government are urged to consider as soon as possible the political, economic and legal questions pertaining to the accession of Yugoslavia. They also appeal to the European Parliament, calling for concrete measures against a general European ecological catastrophe that could happen as a consequence of this bombardment. As an example, they listed the latest bombardments of the chemical plant in Pančevo and the fuel refinery in Novi Sad. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Russia welcomes the direct discussion of President of Serbia Milan Milutinović and the Vice President Šejnović with Ibrahim Rugova. Russia supports all efforts for a political solution of the problem in Kosovo. At the same time, Viktor Chernomirdin, the Special Envoy President Yeltsin for Yugoslavia, continued talking about the necessary diplomatic measures. Today, Viktor Chernomirdin spoke with the Yugoslav ambassador to the Russian Federation, Borislav Milošević. In this long and quite substantive meeting, asked for by Chernomirdin, Ambassador Milošević briefed him on the details of the situation in Yugoslavia. Chernomirdin confirmed that he will soon visit Yugoslavia in order to meet President Milošević. Unless NATO is stopped now, all other countries will have to fear it tomorrow, warned the Council for Defense and Foreign Affairs of Russia. Unless this aggression against Yugoslavia is stopped, the entire system of international security will suffer, including the danger that this war in Yugoslavia becomes global, states the Council. The document warns that NATO could seek soon the next opponent, including possibly Russia. The authors support the efforts of the federal government, parliament and the President of Russia, directed at stopping the aggression and finding a peaceful resolution of the conflict. The statement of this Council for Defense and Foreign Policy was signed by 70 well-known Russian politicians of different orientations, but of single mind, that this aggression is a threat to the world order, for which many nations, especially in Europe, pay dearly with millions of lives. Respected French politician, the representative of the political right, Philippe de Villiers, observed that there is a political solution for Kosovo and made concrete suggestions about how to stop the war against Yugoslavia and the conflict in Kosovo. He sharply criticized some political figures in France who believe that the political means of resolution were exhausted in Rambouillet, as well as that this is the only last exit allowable. In his proposal called Road to Peace, he suggested a ceasefire, a simultaneous stopping of the bombing of Yugoslavia and the action of the Serbian forces in Kosovo. As to the guarantees of these conditions, de Villiers suggested NATO will have to pledge not to renew the bombing campaign without a formal mandate of the UN Security Council. He also believes that the ceasefire should be guaranteed by OSCE monitors that have to come back to the province or the UN forces. At the same time, according to de Villiers' suggestion, all parties should go back to a negotiation table. The goal would be agreement on comprehensive autonomy that the Serbian side would have to pledge to. De Villiers especially insists on categorical refusal of the demands of the Kosovo Albanians for independence. The refusal of the Albanians' request necessitates a strong obligation of NATO not to support or favor any demands for independence, states de Villiers. He also appeals for a gradual phasing out of the sanctions against Yugoslavia. It is noteworthy that this president of the Movement for France, unlike official Paris, doesn't believe that there is a need for foreign military presence in Kosovo. The head of the Italian diplomacy, Lamberto Dini, dissents again from the official position of Italy with his statement that Italy and Europe can no longer depend on the United States. Europe has to find an identity of security. It's obvious that this bombardment cannot reach the necessary goals, and this is why we have to seek new solutions, said Dini. In Rome, the President of the European Commission, Romano Prodi, stated that Russia can have a decisive role in finding a solution for the crisis in Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. That's why Russia in no way can be ignored. Prodi confirmed that President Yeltsin sent him a message today, a letter. According to the President of the European Commission, there are intimations that soon there could be a dialogue so as to overcome this dramatic state of war. Any initiative of this nature should be accepted in a very serious way, stressed Romano Prodi. From the session of the federal government, it has been announced that the fourth week of unyielding bombardment shows that NATO aggressors have failed to reach any of their goals. The Yugoslav defense systems are still efficient and inflict to the aggressor serious damage. At the session of the federal government, presided by Mobir Bulatovic, it was stated that the civilian structures and state organs continue to function successfully despite the state of war. The citizens of Yugoslavia with admirable courage contribute to the defense of the fatherland. State bodies have undertaken all measures to dislocate some industrial plants so as to protect civilians and thwart NATO's attempt to cause ecological disaster. The federal government appealed again to the UN Security Council, demanding condemnation and stopping of the aggression. The federal government once again stresses that the first condition for a political dialogue, stabilization of the conditions in Kosovo and return of all of the refugees, immediate cessation of bombardment and killing of innocent civilians. The government of Serbia at today's session, presided over by Mirko Marjanovic, discussed the measures undertaken regarding economic and social conditions in a state of war. It was stated that all of the government bodies and economic entities successfully implement the measures aimed at greater productivity, exchange rate stability, and market supply. All necessary measures are undertaken to increase production and export. and thus contribute to the defense. Spring sowing activities follow the government program. In many areas, more land is being farmed than last year. The market is well supplied with all necessities for everyday life. The measures of urgent assistance for the workers from the factories that were destroyed by the NATO aggression are efficiently implemented. Additional and alternative programs are underway for employment and social protection of the workers of the factories that were damaged or ruined during the criminal bombardment of NATO. Government stresses that these measures provide successful outcome also due to the exceptional dedication of the population that truly responsibly fulfills its task to defend the country. This is the guarantee that we shall manage to defend our country and satisfy all of the needs of our citizens. The anti-aircraft units of the Army of Yugoslavia last night managed to inflict damages to the aggressor. This is shown by an amateur video from Belgrade as well. Fired from the surface. Right on target. NATO aggressors last night, around 2 hours before midnight, attacked Subotica. They chose civilian targets in one of the most beautiful and most populous parts of Subotica. There are no human victims or injured people, but many buildings are destroyed. One street is completely destroyed. The mayor of Jožef Kasa sent a letter to the president of Hungary, Arpad Genc, to the president of the government of Hungary, Viktor Orban, to Javier Solana, to the European Parliament, and many public figures throughout the world. Subotica is a multi-ethnic city, multi-confessional, multicultural city, and NATO is destroying this unity that we have built through centuries. He's appealing to the entire world community to stop the aggression against Yugoslavia. Sometime before 11 o'clock last night, the enemy aviation again attacked Novi Sad. Despite our anti-aircraft system, in the northwest part of the city there was a strong explosion close to the refinery, and there were 3 missiles that hit the refinery. There were many vapors that threatened the citizens of the neighboring areas. Last night also there was a destruction of a bridge between Smederevo and Kovin. Built between 22 years, it was hit by enemy missiles and there were strong explosions that followed. This was a bridge primarily for civilian purposes, for economic ties between central and southern Serbia, but as well for connections between citizens and cities. Last night around 10 o'clock and 50 minutes, Pančevo factory, the chemical plant, was again hit. There was no danger for the citizens. There is no ecological catastrophe. The criminal NATO alliance, yesterday afternoon and during the evening, hit many military and civilian targets near Podgorica and Danilograd. There was material damage, but no human injuries. Anti-aircraft units responded and opened fire. And during this action in Crna Gora in Montenegro, they hit 3 NATO planes. This was announced by the Information Office of the Second Army of Yugoslavia from Montenegro. Certain officials of the criminal alliance, in order to conceal some of their lies, have launched the lie a few days ago that Yugoslav army went to Albanian territory. Afterwards, those same NATO officials, mixed up in their lies, denied their own statements, and that this was really a deception that was intended to justify their actions is confirmed by the following report. Parallel with the criminal attacks and the aggression from Albania, the experts of the civil alliance are conducting a real psychological propaganda war against Yugoslavia. The latest lie is that our units have violated the territory of Albania near the village of Kamenica behind us. That this is not true is shown by our video. You can see that our units are on our territory. Behind us is the border with Albania, and you can see the Albanian border posts. The lie about the entry of the Yugoslav army on Albanian territory was launched to conceal the aggression of Albanians that has been conducted already for a week around Košara and Morina, our border posts. At the same time, the Albanian artillery fire has attacked our border posts, Morina, that was quite heavily damaged. Throughout the area there are craters from the mines thrown from Albania, the roof is damaged, and you can see shrapnel. After this attack, the terrorists attempted to violate our territory, but our border guards stopped them. The aggression was conducted from Albanian side. The army of Yugoslavia is nowhere in Kamenica, nor in the border posts of Albania, as some media have reported in the West. But you can see over there in Albania jeeps, tractors and trucks that are bringing continuously terrorists' equipment and ammunition. Albanian army officers and terrorists go from there to a little camp near the border, and from there they continue to attack our territory. The border guards of Yugoslavia are exclusively on our territory to prevent terrorists from coming into. From the border posts, we went with a unit from the Pristina Corps that was tasked to find a group of terrorists from the Albanian army, as well as some mercenaries who committed aggression against our country by coming several hundred meters into our territory, coming to a particular plateau that they tried to protect with the help of Albanian artillery. The unit was moving very quickly through a very difficult terrain, and they managed to come as close as 50 meters to the terrorists. After the strong fire against the terrorists, who were in a much more favorable position, we managed to approach the terrorists from the side, after which they fled to Albania, carrying the corpses of the dead bodies. After this efficient action, we found a lot of traces of the terrorists. Camouflage bags and hoods, masks, sleeping bags, sanitary brochures from Germany, US-made knife, upper part of NATO uniform, food remnants from NATO daily rations. The terrorists pushed in this precipice a mortar launcher and their equipment. There are also some remnants of rockets of Chinese production. After this exceptional action of our forces and defeat to the terrorists, Albanian forces opened strong artillery fire. Shrapnel from one of the grenades passed very close to the head of your reporter. Fortunately, it missed, and that's why we could send this report that clearly says that Albania and NATO are conducting aggression from Albania, but they're failing at it. One of the planes of the criminal alliance of NATO was forced to land on the Skopje airport in Macedonia. It was apparently hit and quite damaged by the anti-aircraft units of Yugoslavia. The landing of the airplane in Macedonia was confirmed by the spokesperson of NATO, Eric Muño, avoiding details about this embarrassing end to a plane that had sowed death in Yugoslavia. The information about this forced landing of the plane was also conveyed by the Macedonian radio, but without any details, while the Macedonian Minister of Internal Affairs, Pavle Trajanov, at today's press conference refrained from comments. The Interim Council of Kosovo declared in this province a day of sorrow, expressing the sentiment of the citizens of Kosovo because of the beastly attacks of NATO that inflict on our people unprecedented suffering and material damage. Representatives of the diplomatic corps accredited in our country visited Aleksinac, Ćuprija and Kragujevac to confirm the difficult consequences from this aggression. The diplomatic mission was comprised of ambassadors, their deputies, and military attachés from 24 countries. It was organized by the Foreign Affairs Ministry, and the goal of the visit was for the diplomats to see personally what were the targets that were hit by the bombs and the missiles of our enemies. In Aleksinac, 900 apartment buildings were damaged, 29 houses fully destroyed. The medical center, the first aid clinic, and many economic facilities were damaged. In Ćuprija, in the downtown, you can barely find a house with all of the windows. There are many roofs that are missing. The president of the assembly of the city, Vladimir Stojkovic, reminded the diplomats that 7 missiles hit over 500 objects here. The explosions damaged many houses and schools. 30-some houses will have to be repaired from their foundations on. As to the destruction of the Kragujevac factory Zastava for cars, we have spoken quite a bit. They destroyed not only the factory, but also the energy plant that was heating all of the Kragujevac. At the end of the visit, the members of the diplomatic corps saw for themselves that the aggressor was hitting primarily civilian targets with great consequences, but that there were no military targets nearby. Despite all the bombs falling on Yugoslavia for the past 3 weeks, Belgrade remembers and honors today the victims of the Anglo-American bombardment from 1944. On that 16th of April, 55 years ago, it was Easter, when those once upon called allies and now enemies were bombing Belgrade again. For a second time, these once allies and now enemies are bombing Belgrade. What is the urge? That they express their gratitude for our common struggle in the First and Second World War, for the rescue of their pilots, to return this gratitude with bombs and destructions. 55 years ago, on this day, the Anglo-American fleet began the destruction of Belgrade. They threw their bombs everywhere. They knew that the German military was not in the residential areas, but they still hit every bigger buildings, explaining later on that in many of them there was German administration situated. Their targets were even production facilities, which, given the times, were quite modest. The most horrible thing was that they also destroyed the city maternity ward. Out of the ruins of this ward, 15 women were taken out, as well as 15 newborn babies. How many were left under the ruins was never determined, just as we never learned what was the exact number of all of the Belgradians who died during that bloody Easter. About 2,000 bodies were found, half of them children. Many details attest to the mindless violence of those who sent the bombs against Belgrade. Those who pressed the buttons that threw those bombs from the flying planes. During the following 6 months, there were 9 more bombardments of Belgrade. A lot more lives were lost. The witnesses are still remembering the children going around Belgrade. Only during the first day of the bombardment, there were more than 1,500 bombs. Later on, nobody was counting them. Can we learn anything from this? They say that the Belgradians during that time said, "God, save us from our allies. We will save ourselves from our enemies." In Pristina, at a meeting between the Minister of the Internal Affairs, Vlajko Stojiljković, and the leadership of the police forces of Kosovo, it was noted that the police has fully adjusted its actions to wartime conditions, and that throughout the Republic there is stable public order and peace. At the beginning of this 4th week of the aggression, we can state the protection of the citizens and the securing of the work of the government bodies is in accordance with all the measures for wartime, and that the police is completely fulfilling its legal duties. From the beginning of the bombardment, there have been 150 terrorist attacks in cities against the police of Serbia as well. The police reacted decisively, and the terrorists were reached by the hand of the law. The police continually monitors all of the terrorists until they have found every last one of them. They said that they have arrested 208 various criminals who have used this war confusion to commit various crimes. The police will continue throughout the territory, and especially in Kosovo, execute its tasks in a selfless manner, said the Minister Vlajko Stojiljković. Today in Brussels again, there was a press conference, and the main topic was the responsibility of NATO regarding the bombing of the Albanian civilians coming back to their homes. However, what NATO confirmed yesterday was today, through confused comments, again brought into question. NATO continues to deny or to find answer, that is to say, they can't find an explanation for the massacre in Đakovica, but at the same time announced new air raids, apparently at the request of those refugees. This is what the NATO officials are trying to tell the world from the press conference in Brussels, attempting to misinform rather than inform the public and angering journalists who ask, you know that you attacked. You know that you attacked the refugees column around Jakovica. Why don't you show us a video? Today's meeting with the press, which left several questions unanswered, confirmed once again not only the confusion in NATO, but also between Brussels and Washington. While in Brussels they spoke only about one attack, in Pentagon they spoke about several attacks. In Brussels they are admitting to only one bomb that was thrown by a pilot after he thought there was a military truck, and then it turned out to be a tractor. According to the press from the site, after the attack there were at least 4 bombs. Jamish and the military representative Giuseppe Marani tried to justify the criminal action by saying NATO is not perfect, but it's necessary to find a peaceful solution for Kosovo. NATO is under growing criticism for the increasing catastrophic mistakes that compromise the alliance, and instead of their security, offers them death on the road. There is also the question, how can even the West believe NATO propaganda that all of these actions are done with surgical precision, when they simply have no data about what the pilots did against the refugees? Today's press conference in NATO showed once again that it's very difficult to explain the inexplicable, that the mad actions of NATO in Yugoslavia are primarily against the civilian population. Front pages of most Spanish dailies are dominated by the admission of NATO that they perpetrated the massacre of the civilians near Jakovica. Despite the exhaustive reports from the NATO officials on the murder of some 70 civilians, the papers are silent about the reactions of official Madrid. Secretary General of the Coalition of the United Spain condemned not only the massacre near Jakovica, but also the support of Spain to NATO, that he considers a dangerous international criminal. More and more protests in Spain against this aggression. According to many polls and many public media, most of the Spanish people oppose this aggression against a sovereign and independent country. According to the Bulgarian daily Duma, USA, Britain, France, Germany and other NATO countries can, because of what they're doing against Yugoslavia, be really considered cold-blooded murderers of innocent people. The member of the Bulgarian Academy, Nikolai Todorov, on the occasion of the bombardment yesterday, says that this is anti-civilizational and inhuman action of the aggressor. After a 3-week-long conspiratorial silence regarding the evil NATO aggression that violates brutally the UN Charter and the provisions of international law, finally, after 22 days, we hear from the Security Council of the UN in a presidential announcement. This address to the world public disclosed fully the impotence and subordination of once upon a time world government, which is being aggressively suppressed by the interests of the US and its allies. In the announcement, instead of a decisive condemnation of the attack on a sovereign country, there is unnecessary support for the humanitarian organizations that, as we know, have been allowed to work by our government. The Security Council found it pertinent to express concern for the 2 Australian humanitarian workers who were arrested for spying activities. Now, after 3 weeks of incessant bombing of Yugoslavia that has caused many civilian injuries and victims and huge material damage, the fate of these 2 fake humanitarians blocked the conscience of the President of the Security Council, preventing him to condemn the massacre that was committed on the very same day over those refugees that were going back to their homes. No condemnation of this brutal murder of 70 Albanian refugees. There is no condemnation of this brutal but never declared war of 3 permanent members of the Security Council against US. A war in which their bombs are sowing death among civilians, destroying cities and monuments of culture. All of this under a false justification of preventing humanitarian catastrophe, protection of human rights, and preservation of the credibility of NATO Security Council, didn't have any comment regarding the 55 civilians that were killed in the train Belgrade-Athens, nor regarding the killing of the 16 citizens of Aleksinac, nor regarding hundreds other victims in many other cities of Serbia. NATO calls this casualties collateral damage, and Security Council justifies all this with a conspiratorial silence. This could be the final proofs of the agony of the United Nations and the international law that has fallen before the law of the might. In Greece, because of the aggression against Yugoslavia, there are many anti-NATO demonstrations. Many hundred Greeks blocked the convoy of 15 French trucks bringing military equipment to Macedonia, expressing in this way support to Yugoslavia because of this aggressor attack on it. In tens of Greek cities last night, there were many more protests against the escalation of the aggression against Yugoslavia. Last night, in front of the American embassy in Athens, there was a huge protest. First, they gathered on the square Syntagma to protest once again and to express their solidarity with their friendly Serbian peoples. The citizens, carrying many flags and slogans, thereupon followed together towards the embassy of the US that is continually secured by police forces. After this latest brutal attack of NATO against civilians, yesterday there were many more protests in Larissa, Patra, Yanina, and Katarini. On the main square of Larissa, there were several thousand citizens carrying slogans, America, murderer of people, NATO, get out of Greece, Clinton, new Hitler, expressing their support for Yugoslavia throughout the night, and finally appealing to the democratic public throughout the world to stop this bombing. In Patra, Peloponnese, Ekaterini, there were also humanitarian concerts. This is the beginning of the collection of humanitarian assistance for Yugoslavia, for the citizens who lost their homes in this brutal aggression. Citizens of Germany continue to protest against the evil alliance. More than 1,000 demonstrators, Serbs, Greeks, Macedonians, and Germans gathered in Hamburg, demanding immediate stop of the action. They condemned the brutal aggression and the beastly murder of civilians. At the same time, they supported the courageous people of Serbia in their perseverance against NATO aggression. This is footage from Israel. It was sent by demonstrators in Tel Aviv who have protested several times thus far in front of the US Embassy. In one of the largest Israeli cities, they know very well what suffering is. They themselves were victims of the Nazi Hitler army during Second World War, and now Clinton's gangs are attacking Serbian people and the Serbian Yugoslav state. The demonstrators in Tel Aviv, therefore, were especially vocal regarding Kosovo being Serbian Jerusalem, demanding that Americans and their servants stop the aggression, which cannot be explained to a civilized world at the end of this century. Not only the bridges, but all of the squares in Serbia, Bosnia, Republika Srpska continue to be sites of protest. On these everyday protests that we show you every day, we send a message to the world with song that we are unified. The citizens in Podgorica stayed on a huge meeting throughout the bombing attack on this capital city of Montenegro. We don't give up Kosovo. Of course we won't give it up. We won't give up Kosovo. Students from schools in Požarevac, together with their teachers, are sending a message to the criminals of the world to immediately stop the bombardment of our country. This barbaric aggression is only strengthening our morale and the spirit of our people. Today, the students of Požarevac schools are gaining experience from patriotism. These are marks that are not in their school books, but marks that will be recorded in history. At the protest meeting in Šid against the aggression on our country, citizens of this part of Srem condemned the bombardment of NATO. The cultural center in Srem, together with many cultural associations, poets and actors, sends a message to the aggressors of NATO. Go back to your homes and look there for the germ of evil. Our only alternative is to defend our country. Many birds have surrounded Serbia, birds of prey, trying to conquer Serbia, to take its bones throughout Asia and Europe, and throw in front of their black king the brave heart of this country. Serbia defends itself with song and dance. For 20 days already, the square of Zrenjanin has been filled with people protesting the evil aggression of NATO. They're sending the message, we are not afraid. We shall preserve our unity and sovereignty. And on the 16th day of April, there was also the support of the Serbs from Romania. We brought here our heart to join your heart, your courageous Serbian heart, with which you defend Yugoslavia and Serbia. We love you all. We are proud of you. And once again, we state what we've been saying throughout Romania so that the whole world can hear us. Kosovo is Serbia. We won't give up Kosovo. Long live Yugoslavia. Long live Serbia. Long live the Serbian people. In Zrenjanin, also sport teams came from Vojvodina to express their support. This NATO alliance, headed by this evil criminal Clinton, president of the USA, greatest fascist that humanity knows at this time, they should know that Yugoslavia will defend itself. We used to be, we are, and we will always remain together. This was the message of the mothers of Montenegro gathered in a protest meeting. This protest gathering in Pristina began with a minute of silence for all of the victims of this mindless aggression. This was attended by many groups of gypsies from the area, giving their selfless support for the country and its leadership. One of the most distinguished actresses from Pristina recited poems, and afterwards, on behalf of the Kosovo gypsies, the greeting was expressed. Here we are, the gypsies, together with our brothers, the Serbs, the Turks, the Muslims, the loyal Albanians, and all of the honest citizens of Serbia, to express our solidarity to the defense of the freedom, territorial integrity, and sovereignty of our lovely country, Serbia and Yugoslavia. We, the gypsies, have no other fatherland, nor are we looking for another one. This is where we lived for centuries together, and we want to continue together, regardless of ethnicity or religion. This is where we decided to be together with you and stay with you. At the end of this protest meeting, that because of the Day of Sorrow was not accompanied by music, there was poetry reading by an actress from Pristina. For tomorrow, sharply at noon, another protest has been scheduled in front of the National Theatre in Pristina. There will be many folk bands present. During the program, we received the full report about the visit of the Minister of Internal Affairs, Vlajko Stojković, to Pristina. Let's look at the report. The Minister of Internal Affairs of Serbia, Vlajko Stojković, in Pristina had a discussion with the leadership of the police and political leadership of Kosovo in general. During the meeting, he stressed the following. The Ministry of Internal Affairs of Serbia has, from the beginning of the aggression against our country, acted in accordance with the regulations and the plans that apply to state of war. This means that they have undertaken a whole series of organizational measures and activities and completely fulfilled the duty that was ahead of them to adjust their work to wartime. It has been estimated that at the beginning of this fourth week of aggression, we can speak about these following achievements. Throughout the territory of Republic of Serbia, there is stable public peace and order. The protection of citizens and the protection of the work of the state bodies is at a very high level and in accordance with measures undertaken for state of war. The role of the police forces of Serbia in the defense of Yugoslavia, in everything they do in conjunction with the police duties, they conduct all of their duties successfully. The citizens can see this for themselves, citizens who can see their security and the security of their property. Despite these 23 days of aggression, the fire teams of Serbia continue to function regardless of the danger to which they are exposed. Particular activity of the police is the anti-terrorist struggle under conditions of war. After the first bombs that fell on our country, the self-appointed commanders of the so-called KLA, from their apartments and hotels in Tirana, called the terrorists of KLA to attack the police forces, the institutions, and all of the citizens of Serbia and Kosovo. As we all know, in the last few months, the dominant activity of the terrorist group, the so-called KLA, was city terrorism. beastly attacks, hand grenades, explosive devices were used against people in Peć, Kosovska Mitrovica, Podujevo, Priština, and many other cities of Kosovo. Then there was the bombardment and the appeal of the terrorist leadership to a general attack. The evil forces of NATO and these terrorists synchronized their attacks, and the high officials of NATO even publicly declared that they're constantly in touch with murderers such as Hashim Tači, who is officially being sought by the police in conjunction with grave crimes. From the beginning of the bombardment, 150 terrorist attacks have been committed in cities and settlements, along roads, against many facilities and against the units of the police. In these attacks, a certain number of our people have died, police people, and a greater number has been injured. The response of the police was energetic and decisive, and the terrorist gangs have been reached by the hand of law. Today, in all of the cities of Kosovo, there is peace, the traffic is normal, the humanitarian and other services can function normally. The remnants of the terrorist organizations are continually monitored by the police, who will follow them unless every last one has been captured. In war conditions, our police has reacted energetically to stop very dangerous criminal in Kosovo, where certain individuals as well as groups try to use the chaos of war to commit crimes, burglaries, lootings, and other serious crimes. In close cooperation with military security forces, the police in Kosovo has arrested 208 criminals who have committed various crimes, and in accordance with the criminal code, after their sentence by court, they'll be sent to prison terms that have to be severe enough in order to deter every single person who will try to endanger people regardless of their ethnicity or religion. While NATO is bombarding and killing our people, the police is proud that they have defended on Kosovo every citizen and every ethnic group in an equitable and just manner. On Kosovo, the intensity of the bombardment has been increased from day to day. Rockets and missiles have fallen on cities and villages, especially on Priština, causing a lot of human casualties. The bombardment of the city in Priština and the headquarters of police and the post office in Priština. Following this bombardment, many people were fleeing Priština. Many people were fleeing towards other parts of Serbia, Montenegro, Albania, and Macedonia. The police, even under those conditions, tried to secure the safety of the civilians, but they didn't manage on the 14th of April to protect them from the air attack of those bombs that attacked the columns of civilians. In this tragedy, dozens of citizens were killed, and the police was the first one to come to the site to help the victims. Among the victims of NATO, we have an equality, tragic equality, of Serbs, Muslims, Gypsies, and others. The police forces of Serbia will, throughout the territory of Serbia, and especially on Kosovo, continue to fulfill its tasks uncompromisingly, selflessly, and thus fulfilling its duty towards the state and the people.
Now more on the situation in Yugoslavia and an interview with the managing editor of the Illyria